So, General Ed Bolton. This is another edition of Yo on the Go. I'm sitting in Ed's wonderful home. We've had a lot of discussions. We've had a lot of fun times so far. Discussions specifically about leadership. Yeah. And I asked you, just to recap what we've been sharing about, what are the three core principles do you see in leadership that's important?
It's difficult when speaking about leadership, I think, as a first principle, to separate the leader from the situation. If you think of great presidential leaders, you would go to Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because he won the Civil War. You go to Franklin Roosevelt, Depression, World War II. You go to George Washington, he invented the model. And so at the end of it, I believe leaders are judged on the results they do. Right? And so that's the first thing I think about when I think of leaders. However, it's situational. You could be a leader that inherits a fantastic team and make them a little better or a little worse, or a leader that inherits a terrible team and makes them a lot better. So it's hard to tease that out. But a couple of things that I've seen work across my experiences, military FA and aerospace. Number one, I think, is a leader is an evaluator, an assessor. A leader comes in and examines the situation, the challenges, the team that person has, and comes to an agreement with their boss. There's a lot of talk and a lot of literature on long-term goals, long-term visions, the importance of those. I'm not totally sold in, totally bought in on that. The world changes very quickly. The world we live in today is not the world that anyone would have predicted 15 years ago or even 5. I think you should have an idea of where you want to go long-term, but what's most important is what's next and what's now. And a leader needs to know that. Because if you don't know what's next or what's now, you don't know how to evaluate this meeting or that meeting, this action or that action. You don't know how to tell when someone is good or not if you don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So I think that's the first thing a person has to do is come up with a clear picture of what they're looking for. The next thing, and maybe it's the most important thing, leaders are only as good as their teams. And I tend to use sports analogies. The great basketball team right now is the Golden State Warriors. I suspect that if I became the Golden State Warriors coach, they'd still win games. And you can take the worst team in the NBA. I couldn't make them any worse. So the best thing to do as a leader is assemble the best team you can, right? And you don't always have control over that, but you have influence over it. Mm-hmm. If you treat people well along the way, and get a reputation for being a stand-up person that treats people with respect, people are going to want to work for you. Mm-hmm. And you'll have that edge when it comes to recruiting.
But you did mention one thing in our discussion before was this idea that leadership is highly dependent on your followers. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, they do the work, right? Yeah. So one of the hard lessons I had to learn, all of us get out of engineering school, want to be the best engineer on planet Earth. And, I went down that path for 10 years and it almost killed me. And then I woke up one day and realized that 5 average engineers are better than the smartest engineer in the world. You can't be in 5 meetings at the same time. You can't do 5 separate things at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I would put more, and that was kind of a big mid-career decision for me. I put more of my emphasis on being a leader and developing the people around me. Now, I've had leadership, I was in Boy Scouts, church, school. I've had leadership training my whole life. But that's when I really said I'm going to double down on leadership jobs, leadership opportunities, and being the best leader I can. The leader, I think, gets too much credit when there's a success, and too little blame when there's a failure. That's what I would say.
You mentioned a favorite leadership book. What is it and why?
So a favorite leadership book that I have, so there's a number of them. So I go with a Coaching Life, Dean Smith. He was a famous coach of University of North Carolina basketball team in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. He one point that I'll mention, when there was still segregation when he started coaching. He went to a tournament and they wouldn't allow the black players to stay in a hotel, and so he wouldn't play his team. He had a losing record his first year. They hung him in effigy at the school. He ended up being among the most winningest coaches in history. He was Michael Jordan's coach in college, among many other pros. I think even if you didn't know who Michael Jordan was, he'd still be impressive as a coach. So I think a coach's life would be a very good one. First, break all the rules. It's 40,000 surveys from the Gallup organization that talks about leadership. The bottom line of that is that the number one thing that accrues to a person's enjoyment of their job is their relationship with their first level supervisors. So it goes back to my thing about building the right team. But going back to a coach's life, Dean Smith, the preparation and the structure and the framework he provided for the team. I talk about things he did from a value perspective, so I respect that quite a bit. But the framework he provided for the team to prepare themselves for situations that were unusual, it was very, very impressive. Very impressive. At the end of it, it's more about them than it is about you. And so the more you can give away, the more you can get a great team, the more you can build your people up, the more you can fight for them, the more you can invest in them, the more you can give them the credit. At the end of it, you win. I think one of the big mistakes that I've seen leaders make is get in competition with their people, try to show who's smarter, show who's better. The real good leadership subordinate relationship, to me, is more like a mentor or a coach, where you have an understanding that your success is my success. And if you think of it, if their success is your success, and you ought to be doing everything you can to make them look good, even if you have to take a step in the background, because you can make this person and mentor them and then grow this person and grow that person, so you have 5 people out there doing great things versus just you. So that'd be the number one thing. It's more about them than it is about you.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, and I just really appreciate your encouraging words in our time together.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Ed.
Very welcome.
Okay.